I watched my daughter-in-law flush my medication like it was clutter, not life-saving. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. "You're better without it," she said, smiling like she was doing me a favor. My son stood behind her, silent. After being his mother for 40 years, after holding him through 2 fevers and 1 divorce, after welcoming her into my home with nothing but grace, they treated me like a burden. So I rewrote my will. And this time, she didn't make the cut. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Lois Callahan woke to the sharp spin of the ceiling fan and the sour taste of pennies on her tongue. Her fingers twitched before she could think to move them, and the room swayed like a boat lifting off its moorings. She blinked once, then again. Pale light filtered through the gauzy curtains of the guest bedroom, thick with the scent of eucalyptus oil. Sierra's diffuser again, humming softly near the dresser like a mosquito. She reached for the nightstand, knocking her glasses off in the process. Her heart thudded unevenly, missing a step, then 2. A cold film of sweat clung to her neck. She waited, listening to her body. It wasn't the first time she'd woken this way, but it was the 3rd day in a row. With slow, deliberate movements, Lois sat up and reached for the pale blue pill organizer she always kept in her toiletry pouch. Monday through Sunday, morning and evening slots, color-coded. She pried it open, empty, again. No Tuesday morning pill, no Monday, no Sunday night. Just the echo of her own breathing and a sharp rising awareness in her chest. Something was wrong. Deeply, deliberately wrong. She slipped on her robe and shuffled into the adjoining guest bathroom. The scent of bleach hit her hard, too fresh. The toilet lid was closed. A strange occurrence in this house, where Sierra's rules about airborne germs meant it was usually up. Lois lifted the lid. There, swirling lazily in the water, was a white capsule, half dissolved, stuck to the porcelain like a last desperate whisper. A tiny, traitorous bloom of blue leaked into the bowl. She stood very still. Behind her, footsteps. Then the chirp of Sierra's voice, bright and blameless as morning bird song. "Lois? Oh, did you drop something?" She leaned in, peering over Lois's shoulder with a concerned frown practiced enough to be professional. "Those old hands can be slippery with pills." "Huh?" Lois turned, meeting her daughter-in-law's gaze with the cool calm she'd honed over 72 years of Southern politeness. It was already in there. Sierra's lips twitched into a smile. "You sure? You looked a little woozy when you got up. Maybe you forgot you took it." She chuckled gently, then added with a wink, "Happens to the best of us." Lois said nothing. She flushed the toilet slowly, watched the water swirl, the pill vanish, and something deeper than anger settle in her chest. A stillness, not resignation, preparation. Ethan appeared in the hallway, his tie loose, coffee in hand. "Everything okay?" "Your mother found one of her pills in the toilet," Sierra said breezily. "I told her she probably dropped it." Ethan raised his eyebrows, but didn't look surprised. "She's just looking out for you, Mom. You know she worries about the side effects." Lois studied her son. He didn't look at her, just sipped his coffee and rubbed his temple like a man trying to stay out of it. "Of course," she said lightly. "I'll be more careful." And that was all. No accusations, no raised voices. She walked past them, the hallway floor cool beneath her bare feet, the walls lined with smiling photos of a family that no longer quite looked like hers. Back in the guest room, Lois pulled out the small floral journal she kept zipped into the lining of her purse. Not for poetry, not for prayers, for records, dates, times, facts. September 3rd, pill missing. Symptoms, dizziness, irregular heartbeat. Found capsule in toilet, partially dissolved. She underlined the date twice, then closed the journal. From the hallway she heard Sierra laughing. The same laugh she'd used last Thanksgiving when she insisted the cranberry sauce was too processed for Lila. The same one she'd used when Lois had asked to keep her own doctor, her own prescriptions. Lois didn't laugh. She pulled her cell phone from the charger, checked the battery, and opened her notes app. One word at the top, documentation. She added today's entry. And then she did something Sierra hadn't anticipated. She opened her phone's camera and quietly snapped a photo of the toilet before the flush. Even Grace had limits. By Wednesday morning, Lois had memorized the shape of her own heartbeat. It came in slow stutters now, no longer the reliable metronome it had been all her life, but an uncertain rhythm, pausing when it shouldn't, racing when it had no reason to. She lay still on the porch swing, half shaded under the striped awning, her skin pale and slick despite the warm breeze threading through the marsh. The morning sun lit up the Spanish moss draping the trees across the street, but her vision was hazy, like she was watching life through cellophane. Nausea rolled up her throat without warning. She reached for the tea Sierra had brewed earlier, herbal and useless, and took a cautious sip. It did nothing. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the cup back down. The journal lay open beside her, pen tucked into the binding. September 4th. Symptoms: fatigue, nausea, palpitations. She wrote it slowly, like each word was a stone being laid into a foundation. Because that's what this was, a foundation, of proof, of truth, of something no one could call forgetfulness. The sound of tires crunching gravel pulled her from the page. A familiar blue sedan rolled into the driveway, parking neatly beside Sierra's spotless hybrid. The car door creaked open. "Lo!" Janet's voice came from around the hedge, clipped and no-nonsense as ever. "You look like hell." Lois smiled faintly, but didn't stand. "Feel like it too." Janet stepped onto the porch and took one look at her friend's face before sitting down hard beside her. "Jesus, you're gray." "I know," Lois said simply. "Does your doctor know you're like this?" "I haven't told him yet." She turned her head slowly. "But I want you to do something for me." Janet narrowed her eyes. "What?" "I need you to stop at CVS. Ask for my last fill records. They'll need your ID and my birth date. Just say I'm too sick to come in." Janet didn't ask why. She just nodded. "You think they've been messing with your meds?" Lois's fingers tightened around her pen. "I don't think." "I know." Janet exhaled through her nose and muttered, "God damn." An hour later, Janet returned with a folded receipt and a printed medication log. She handed it over like a sealed verdict. "They said your last refill was on August 28th. 30 pills. There should be 5 left. But you said the bottle's empty?" Lois held it out in her palm, bone dry. Not a single pill or scrap of cotton. Janet swore under her breath. Lois didn't flinch. She took the pharmacy log and slipped it into a new manila folder she'd labeled in thick black Sharpie. Medication discrepancies. Behind it were the first 2 pages of journal notes, her symptoms, her pill organizer photos, and the snapshot from yesterday morning. The half-dissolved capsule in the toilet. Janet watched her work like a court reporter, quiet and focused. Later that evening, Ethan appeared in the doorway to the guest room. His voice was low, tentative. "Hey, Mom, Sierra mentioned, you're worried about your meds?" Lois didn't look up. She was sorting the manila folder into her suitcase, right between a pair of ironed slacks and a labeled Ziploc of socks. "I'm not worried," she said evenly. "I'm attentive." Ethan scratched the back of his neck, unsure whether that was better or worse. "Maybe you just miscounted." "Happens." She turned to face him, slow and composed. "I didn't miscount." A beat passed. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed again. He gave a small, helpless shrug and walked away. When she was sure he was gone, Lois sat down at the desk and reopened her journal. September 4th, confirmed. 5 pills should remain. None found. CVS log secured. She paused, pen hovering above the page, then added a line beneath it. Intentional interference suspected. Repeat pattern emerging. Further documentation required. Her hand shook as she capped the pen. Not from age, but from the adrenaline of recognition, of clarity, downstairs. She could hear the sound of Sierra's blender roaring through the kitchen. Banana, kale, ice, denial. Lois stood and closed the guest room door quietly. She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and began typing a new message. To Dr. Saperstein, subject. Urgent medication concerns. Body. I'd like to schedule a call to discuss suspected external interference with my prescriptions. Symptoms worsening. Evidence collected. Please advise. She didn't hit send. Not yet. She just stared at the cursor blinking at the end of the sentence. Waiting, patient, alive. It started with a knock at the front door, brisk and coded like Morse. Janet. Lois opened it just enough to let her in and quickly reset the deadbolt. Outside, the Charleston heat swelled, syrup thick. Inside, the air was tight with silence and the faint hum of a refrigerator coil laboring just a bit too loud. Janet didn't take off her sunglasses. Bring your phone, she said. You got a ring cam on the side gate, right? Lois nodded once. She already knew what Janet was thinking, and more importantly, what she might find. They moved to the kitchen table, the house empty. Ethan was at work. Sierra had gone out for a clarity hike after her turmeric smoothie. Lila was at school. Lois opened the Ring app, tapped the history icon, and swiped back 3 days. There, Janet said, leaning in, finger tapping the screen like a gavel. That's your trash can by the azaleas, right? The video loaded. It was dated September 2nd, just after 7:15 a.m. In the frame, Sierra appeared, barefoot, sports bra, and yoga pants, clutching something white and crumpled in one hand. She looked back once over her shoulder, then tossed the bundle into the side trash bin. A flutter of wrappers spilled out, and she shoved the lid down fast. Janet whistled low. Busted. They didn't speak as Lois pulled up the footage again, this time saving the clip to her phone, then again to her cloud storage. Her fingers were cold, even though the kitchen was warm. 10 minutes later, they stood in the driveway. Janet reached into the trash bin, her gloved hands methodical. Tell me you labeled that bag already. Lois handed her a gallon-size freezer bag with a blank evidence tag sticker across the front. You think I wouldn't? Janet grinned, but it didn't reach her eyes. Didn't think I'd ever see the day where I'd be doing forensics in your driveway. Together, they pulled out a handful of damp, lemon-scented trash bags until Janet found the crumpled white paper. Inside, 2 pill blister packs, one with broken seals, the other fully flattened, and a small lined notepad page. The ink had bled from moisture, but a few words were still visible. Monday, 9 a.m., Tuesday, 9 a.m., Wednesday, 9 a.m. Each line ended with a check mark. Lois stared at it. She was tracking it. Janet sealed the contents, then reached into her purse and handed Lois a Sharpie. Label it. Date, time, initials, everything, Lois did. Slowly, carefully. The bag now read, Recovered 9/5, side trash bin, 7:15 a.m. activity on Ring camera. LCJP. She snapped a photo of the bag from 3 angles and placed it flat in a cardboard file box she'd started labeling the night before. The next call went to her doctor's office. Dr. Saperstein's voice came through the speakerphone, professional but concerned. Mrs. Callahan, I reviewed your refill history and symptoms. You were definitely underdosing last week. It wasn't voluntary, Lois said calmly. I understand. And I'm documenting that now. I'll be writing a clinical note stating that the lapse was due to external interference. Lois nodded, even though he couldn't see. Please also note that I've resumed my regular dosing. And your symptoms should stabilize now that you're compliant again. But if anything worsens, I'll call immediately. Janet was already texting a new contact into Lois's phone. Marcus Ellison, estate attorney. You ready for him? Janet asked once they hung up. Lois's mouth tightened. I should have updated the will months ago. That's not what I asked. Lois looked up, meeting her friend's eyes. Yes, I'm ready. That afternoon, Marcus arrived exactly on time. Crisp charcoal suit, polished shoes, legal pad under one arm. He didn't waste pleasantries. In the living room, Lois laid everything out on the coffee table. The ring footage, the pill wrappers, the handwritten log, the empty bottle, the CVS printout, the doctor's statement. The manila folders sat stacked in chronological order. Marcus glanced at the contents, his gaze sharp and clinical. This is clean. You've done the hard part. Lois leaned back in her chair. Not yet. I want Sierra completely removed. No indirect benefit. Not even through Ethan. Marcus nodded once. Then we'll start with a draft will revision. You'll retain control over medical decisions, financial access, and we'll reinforce the no contest clause. Janet crossed her arms. Make it ironclad. Marcus smirked. It already is. Lois stood and moved to the desk drawer, unlocking it with a tiny brass key. She pulled out a letter, thick cream stationery, handwritten in fountain pen. What's that? Marcus asked. Lois looked down at the envelope. My reason. She placed it on top of the legal stack, right next to Sierra's flushed evidence. Then she turned toward the window, watching the wind flicker through the garden ferns. Outside, a car door slammed. Sierra was home. The echo of Sierra's car door faded, muffled by layers of brick and magnolia. Inside, Lois didn't flinch. She simply moved to the dining table and lit the soft glow lamp next to her folders. She won't come in here, Janet said quietly, not with Marcus still parked in the driveway. Lois glanced toward the window. Sierra's reflection lingered in the glass pane for a moment, a frozen silhouette holding a yoga mat and a stainless steel water bottle, as if the world outside was still playing by her rules. Marcus flipped the pages of Lois's existing will, his fingers moving with surgical focus. As it stands now, he said, 60% of your estate is split jointly between Ethan and Sierra. The remaining 40 is divided among charitable disbursements and your granddaughter's trust. Lois sat perfectly still. What happens if I don't trust the joint anymore? You can specify individual beneficiaries, Marcus replied. But if you want Ethan to still inherit while removing her entirely, we'll need to structure it carefully. Separate shares, no marital assumption. I want her out, Lois said, directly and indirectly. Understood. He pulled a clean draft from his folder and began crossing out lines with the edge of his pen, replacing them with deliberate strokes. Each movement felt like an exorcism. Do we add a no contest clause? He asked. Yes, Lois answered, but with explanation. She reached for the envelope, the one she'd written by hand. Cream stationery, 4 pages, folded and sealed. She'd rewritten it twice. No accusations, just facts, observations, boundaries. The kind only a woman of her generation could craft, with elegance, gravity, and a knife hidden between the lines. I want this attached to the estate file. Marcus took it without comment, slipping it into a folder marked Letter of Intent. Final revision. The sound of the clasp snapping shut felt louder than it was. From the corner of the room, Janet stepped forward with a second form in hand. You've got the health directive too, right? I do, Marcus confirmed. We'll revoke the previous one that listed Sierra as secondary proxy. Janet laid her hand flat on the table. Then let's make it official. Lois reached for the pen. The healthcare directive was short, just a few pages, but heavy in what it meant. She initialed each line, then signed the final page with practiced steadiness. When Janet added her signature below as witness and designated proxy, the document felt sealed in more than ink. Medical decisions are now yours, Marcus said to Janet. Effective immediately. Lois looked at her friend. No more assumptions. No more access. Janet gave her a solemn nod. No one's getting between you and your meds again. A silence settled, thick with finality. "There's one more thing," Marcus added, reaching for his briefcase. "Back in April, during your brief hospital stay, Sierra had you sign a temporary power of attorney form. It was good for 6 months. Technically, she still has access to some of your medical records and can initiate requests on your behalf." Lois blinked slowly. "Revoke it. Now." Marcus smiled tightly. Already prepared. He slid the revocation form across the table. Lois signed it without hesitation. Janet notarized it using her portable stamp kit. The paperwork went into a separate envelope marked urgent to be filed immediately. Outside, a door shut. The back porch this time. Sierra's sandals clipped across the deck, then paused. A text buzzed on Lois's phone. "Sierra, everything okay in there? You've been quiet." Lois stared at it for a long moment, then set the phone down face first. Marcus began packing up. "This version of the will go into effect once signed and witnessed. I'll return tomorrow with the final draft and my paralegal. Until then, no changes will be communicated to any involved parties." "Not yet," Lois said. "She's going to feel it, not hear it." Janet gave a half smile. Subtle like thunder. They shared a glance. Brief, bone deep. Lois stood and walked to her fireproof lockbox in the hall closet. She removed the old version of her will, the one Sierra had once skimmed with a smirk and called morbid prepper energy, and held it for a moment. Then, with deliberate fingers, she tore it clean in half. The sound echoed down the hallway, and upstairs, something creaked. The next morning, the house smelled like grapefruit rind and vinegar, Sierra's preferred disinfectant blend. Lois came downstairs early, showered, dressed in her slate gray linen slacks and a pale blue blouse she'd ironed herself the night before. She moved deliberately, like a woman heading into a boardroom, not a kitchen. Sierra was at the counter blending something aggressively orange. She didn't turn around. Lois set her empty teacup into the sink and dried her hands slowly on a towel. "I know what you've been doing." Sierra glanced over her shoulder, blinking once, then smiled like someone choosing charm over defense. "Excuse me?" "With my medication," Lois said. "The flushing, the log, the wrappers in the trash." Sierra turned the blender back on for a moment. Too long, too loud. When she finally switched it off, she leaned her elbow on the counter and tilted her head. "Lois, come on, that's a pretty serious accusation." Lois didn't blink. "It's not an accusation, it's a record." Sierra's smile thinned. "Did Janet put you up to this?" "She's always been suspicious of me. Just because I don't believe in drowning people in pills doesn't make me dangerous." Lois nodded once, calm. "You're right. Beliefs don't make someone dangerous. Actions do." Sierra laughed, then stepped away from the counter and poured the smoothie into her travel tumbler. "Well," she said, snapping on the lid, "maybe it's time to go home." The air shifted. Sierra continued breezily. "This was always supposed to be temporary, right? You're looking better, stronger, you even have your sass back." She grinned, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Lila will miss you." Lois didn't respond. She picked up her keys and wallet from the side table, walked quietly up the stairs, and began to pack. She folded each blouse with precision, slacks pressed flat, socks rolled into tight orbs. Her toiletries zipped into compartments like medical instruments. No goodbyes, no hugs, not even to Ethan, who hadn't come home until late and had gone straight to bed. By 10 a.m., the guest room was stripped, the bed made, her presence erased. Janet pulled into the driveway just as Lois stepped outside, suitcase in hand. "You sure?" Janet asked. Lois nodded. "I crossed the line. I'm not stepping back." They drove in silence for a while, the suburbs giving way to the quiet edge of town where brick homes sat framed by aging oaks. Lois's house stood waiting, tidy, familiar, and full of her rules. By noon, Janet was up on a ladder, installing 2 new wireless cameras, one at the front door, one over the driveway. A third went inside, pointed discreetly at the hallway cabinet where Lois kept her medication. No one touches your pills but you, Janet said, hammering in the final bracket. Motion alerts go straight to your phone. Inside, Lois sat at her dining table, laptop open, eyes scanning every digital account she owned. Banking, pharmacy, email, cloud. She changed every password, removed Ethan and Sierra from all secondary contact fields, and added two-factor authentication across the board. She even renamed her Wi-Fi network Redirection Protocol. Once that was done, she opened a new browser tab and typed in her doctor's office portal. The message she'd drafted but never sent now felt overdue. Subject: Confidential Elder Wellness Concern. Message: I'd like to formally report suspected interference with my prescribed medication regimen. Symptoms documented. External manipulation involved. I've taken protective steps, but would like to file a wellness concern in confidence for record purposes. Please advise on next steps. She hit send without hesitation. The screen refreshed. A tiny green check mark appeared. Outside, Janet finished adjusting the camera angle on the porch, then stepped back inside. All secure, no blind spots. Lois looked up from her screen. I want a full printed copy of my prescription history. Every refill, every note, every interaction. CVS said they'd prepare it. I'll pick it up this afternoon. Janet gave a short nod. We'll make a binder. Lois pushed the laptop aside and reached for her leather notebook. She flipped to a new page and wrote in small, firm script. September 6th. Left Ethan and Sierra's. Security measures installed. Doctor contacted. Passwords changed. Complaint filed. Then she underlined it. From the corner of the room, her landline rang. The number was blocked. Janet raised an eyebrow. Lois reached out and answered without flinching. A woman's voice came through the line, clipped and falsely sweet. Lois, hi, it's Rebecca, Sierra's friend, from the book club. Lois didn't respond. Rebecca continued. I just thought you should know. Sierra says you've been making some very serious claims, and that you might be confused. I figured you'd want to set the record straight before things get messy. Lois's eyes narrowed. Tell Sierra, she said softly. She should stop sending proxies. She hung up. Then she turned to Janet. Tomorrow, she said. We start filing in layers. The messages started coming in by dawn, not calls. Those could be ignored too easily. These were texts, emails, voicemails sent without ringing first. The kind of digital noise meant to poke, provoke, and linger. Sierra, Lois, we should talk. All this tension isn't good for your heart. Sierra, I've told Ethan you're spiraling. He doesn't believe it, but I'm honestly concerned. Sierra, you're dividing this family, Sierra. You'll regret it. Lois didn't reply. She archived each message into a new folder titled External Contact, Archive Only. Her phone's notification sound remained off. She muted Sierra's thread and forwarded the emails to a secure backup account Janet helped her set up the night before. Not responding wasn't weakness. It was strategy. She had lived long enough to know silence, in the right hands, could be sharper than any accusation. That afternoon, she sat across from Marcus Ellison again, this time in his office, a converted Charleston brownstone where thick crown molding met sleek metal furniture. His assistant offered coffee. Lois declined. Marcus slid a stack of documents toward her. We've got the will draft finalized, he said, but let's talk about the trust allocations again. Any changes? Lois nodded, slow but firm. Lila, Marcus raised an eyebrow. You want to increase the amount? Not just that. I want a clause added, education-specific. Books, tutoring, extracurriculars. She's already a reader, and she's sensitive. If Sierra's going to shape her home, I want to shape her options. Marcus smiled faintly. I can add a designated education stipend to her minor's trust. She won't know about it until she's older, but it'll be there. Solid protection. Lois looked out the window toward the street. Protection is the only legacy I have left to give. A few moments passed in comfortable quiet, until Marcus opened a slim folder marked Health Rights. "One more thing," he said. "We're ready to move forward on Sierra's medical access revocation. I've drafted the letter notifying her and all applicable medical entities, pharmacy, primary care, hospital networks. Include her email and home address," Lois said. "And make it formal." He nodded. "There's no way she can override it now, but this will make it visible to every system." Lois signed the letter with an ink pen that didn't so much glide as press. A signature not just of name, but of resolve. By the time she got home, a thick envelope sat in her mailbox. Return address: Callahan Residence, Mount Pleasant, SC. The handwriting on the front was small and neat, written in pencil. She knew it before she opened it. Inside, a single folded card with pink daisies across the front and the words, "Thinking of you," in glittery script. The inside held only one sentence: "I hope you're feeling strong again. Love, Lila." No parental note, no signature from Sierra, just Lila, her looping, careful letters stretching across the page like a child trying to spell love as safety. Lois closed the card gently and set it beside her tea. That night, she added another entry to the notebook. September 7th, Lila sent a card, added educational clause to trust, removed Sierra from all remaining medical access. Messages saved, no replies given. Below it, she taped the note, trimmed just enough to fit between the lines. She didn't cry. That emotion had passed days ago. What remained now was a bone-deep steadiness, something more enduring than grief or even betrayal, something earned. She turned off the lamp and walked to her safe, unlocking it with the brass key. Inside, 3 folders had been labeled earlier that morning. Now, next, never. She slipped Lila's card into the next folder. Then she reached for the burner phone Marcus had provided. A secure, untraceable line for legal correspondence only. A single voicemail had just landed. She played it. Ethan's voice, raw and hesitant. "Hey, Mom, Sierra said you're still upset. She's trying, really. I don't want to lose the family over this. Maybe we can all sit down together and clear the air?" There was a pause, then a quieter echo. "I love you. Call me back, please." Lois didn't save it. She didn't delete it either. She just hit archive, same as the rest. And tomorrow she'd start the paperwork to list Janet as her medical proxy across state systems. The last loose thread. The blood pressure cuff hissed softly around Lois's arm, the only sound in the exam room besides the rhythmic tick of a battery-powered wall clock. Dr. Saperstein watched the monitor, brow furrowed in professional neutrality. "Still elevated," he murmured, "but nothing like last week." Lois nodded once. "I've been back on schedule." He made a note on his tablet. "Your chart reflects that. Symptoms improving since medication adherence resumed. No new episodes?" "None," Lois said. "Unless we count unsolicited voicemails." Dr. Saperstein chuckled under his breath. "Fair." He stood, peeled the cuff from her arm, and folded it neatly. "Keep doing what you're doing." "And Lois?" He paused. Not many people your age would have caught what was happening, let alone documented it. Lois met his eyes, voice steady. "I was a school secretary for 30 years. You learn to keep records, especially when no one believes you the first time." Outside, the sun was already burning off the morning mist. Charleston had a way of holding heat like a secret, slow and tight. Lois stepped into it, jacket draped over her arm, hair pinned back into a no-nonsense bun. Janet was waiting in the car, passenger seat full of manila folders and a fresh pack of sticky tabs. "Still ticking?" she asked. "Clockwork," Lois said, climbing in. Back at the house, the dining table had been converted into a war room. Janet had spread everything out. The will revisions, trust clauses, prescription records, ring footage printouts, CVS logs, and the letter to the medical board, all sorted by date, with color-coded tabs. "You ever think we missed our calling as auditors?" Janet said. sliding a binder spine label into place. Timeline, interference events. I think I'm living mine now, Lois replied. She leaned over, straightened a tab, then turned away. She didn't want to look at the pill bag again. Instead, she picked up a flyer she'd brought home from the library a week earlier. A printed announcement with little tear-off tabs at the bottom. Senior Tech Workshop, Empowering Elders in the Digital Age. Janet eyed it. You gonna do it? Lois nodded. It's time. The library smelled of old bindings and lemon floor polish. A place of rules and reverence, two things Lois had always respected. By Friday afternoon, she was standing in front of 6 folding chairs, a whiteboard behind her, her tablet hooked up to a borrowed projector. The screen displayed the title of her session, How to Track Your Medications Digitally and Why You Should. She clicked to the next slide. A simple line appeared. Trust, but log everything. Lois scanned the small group. 3 women, 2 men, and 1 wide-eyed retiree who looked like he might still think Bluetooth was a dental condition. They watched her with that hungry, grateful attention older adults rarely received outside a doctor's office or a courtroom. My name is Lois Callahan, she said, voice clear. And I'm here today because I learned the hard way that being right doesn't matter unless you can prove it. A woman in the back leaned forward slightly. Lois tapped the screen again. A new slide. A screenshot of a mobile medication app. Time-stamped. Color-coded. Backed up twice. No one should have to defend their health or their memory without tools. Applause came softly at the end. Not the kind you clap with your hands. The kind that shows up in the way people linger, ask follow-up questions, write things down. Lois drove home alone, the late summer dusk brushing against the windshield like a soft curtain. Later that night, Janet texted a link. No words, just a screenshot. It was a public post, written by Sierra on her Wellness in the Wild blog. Sometimes the hardest part of healing is letting go of toxic elders who weaponize their diagnoses. Big Pharma has conditioned entire generations to fear natural healing. What we call dementia, I call karmic accountability. Not everyone aging is wise. Some are just louder. Underneath, a stream of comments. Most supportive, a few hesitant. You're so brave. Preach, Queen. Been there, it's the guilt they cling to. Any legal tips for dealing with manipulative in-laws? Lois didn't reply. She didn't even finish the thread. Instead, she screenshotted the entire post, saved it to a new folder, public defamation, logged. Then she opened her notebook. September 8th, BP stabilizing. Legal files organized. First workshop taught. Sierra attacking publicly. She capped her pen. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the hallway camera, always watching. Her phone buzzed once, an email from a new sender. Subject line, Formal Notice of Inquiry, Elder Wellness Review. Pending Lois opened it, and smiled. Lois wore her pearls, not the good ones. Those were in the safe. Just the simple string Ethan gave her when he graduated from college. She wanted to feel anchored, but not sentimental, focused, not frail. The psychologist's office sat on the 2nd floor of a low-rise brick building near the marsh, where the smell of wet reeds slipped through the windows, no matter how tightly they were closed. The waiting room was sterile, pale blue, like a dentist's office with better lighting. A table of word puzzles sat untouched. Dr. Brenner greeted her in the hall. Mid-40s, soft-spoken, Yale ring. She'd looked him up before scheduling. No red flags, no loose affiliations with Sierra's wellness circles. I appreciate you seeing me on short notice, Lois said, extending her hand. I admire your initiative, he replied. Most people don't pursue a cognitive eval unless someone's forcing them. She smiled slightly. I prefer to be preemptive. They began with baseline questions: orientation, memory, executive functioning. Then logic puzzles, language exercises, story recall. She was meticulous but unhurried, answering each task with calm precision. When asked to draw a clock set to 11:10, her pen barely hesitated. At the end, Dr. Brenner set down his tablet and folded his hands. "You are, by every standard," he said, "coherent, articulate, and fully competent. No signs of cognitive decline or psychological instability." Lois nodded. "Put it in writing," he chuckled. "I plan to." The notarized report arrived the next morning by courier, sealed in an embossed envelope, 2 pages, and a signed affidavit. She slid it directly into the Now folder in her safe, just behind her updated will and medication log. Then she made 2 certified copies, one for Janet and one for Marcus. "Psych eval?" Janet asked when Lois handed it over that afternoon. Lois nodded. "I want everything locked down before the inquiry begins. If they come after me with claims of mental fog or senility, I want that answer dated and stamped." "Good," Janet said, because Sierra's latest Instagram post was a doozy. She said she witnessed elder confusion firsthand. Lois didn't flinch. Then she won't mind being corrected. That night, Lois drafted the cease and desist herself. It was crisp and clinical. No rage, no emotion, just bullet-pointed facts, legal citations, and a firm warning. Cease all defamatory commentary, directly or indirectly, referencing Lois Callahan. A copy was sent via certified mail, another to Sierra's business email, a third uploaded to her legal archive. She didn't include a signature. Just the line, "This correspondence has been forwarded to counsel for documentation." She hit send and leaned back in her chair, the printer still warm beside her. 15 minutes later, her phone buzzed. "Ethan." She didn't answer. A voicemail appeared. She pressed play and let it speak to the ceiling. "Mom, look, I saw the letter. I don't even know what to say. Sierra's upset. She says you're escalating things way too far. You're making this legal? Really?" There was a pause, as if he were hoping she'd pick up halfway through. "This isn't the way. We're a family. You don't cut someone out of your life over a misunderstanding. Sierra just wants what's best for everyone. I know she can be strong-willed, but she didn't mean any harm." Another pause. Softer now. "Please don't make this permanent. Just call me back. Let's talk, before this gets uglier." He hung up. Lois didn't hit archive. Not this time. She saved it. Because it mattered. Not because he was right, he wasn't. But because it showed what Ethan still couldn't see. That passivity, wrapped in politeness, was its own kind of complicity. The next morning, Janet walked into Lois's kitchen carrying a sealed folder. "Delivered this to Marcus already," she said, tapping the envelope. He said, and I quote, "Tell Lois she just burned the last legal bridge Sierra could ever try to cross." Lois set down her tea. Good. Janet's phone buzzed next. A news alert. Her eyes scanned it once, then again. She handed it over, screen facing up. A Charleston health and wellness watchdog blog had picked up Sierra's elder care comments and was dissecting them line by line. The headline read, "When Wellness Turns Hostile, Influencer Targets Elder's Mental State After Inheritance Dispute." At the bottom, a note that an elder wellness review had been formally opened and was now under public scrutiny. Lois read the article slowly. She didn't speak. Instead, she walked to her fireproof safe, pulled out her Never folder, and slipped in a new sheet of paper. Across the top, in bold block letters, "In case of posthumous challenge, media release draft." The call from the pharmacist came mid-morning. Lois had just finished reviewing her binder tabs, again, when her cell lit up with CVS James Island on the screen. She answered with her usual clipped grace. "Mrs. Callahan," the voice said, a touch cautious. "Yes. This is David in the pharmacy. We flagged something in your account activity and wanted to make sure you were aware before we escalate." Lois sat up straighter. "Go on." "There was an attempted refill request on your heart medication last week, submitted through our online portal using an old login. The refill was denied because the prescription hadn't yet qualified under insurance for a new fill." He paused. "But here's the thing. The system registered the request as coming from a new IP, not the one you usually use." I didn't request anything, Lois said firmly. I figured. We already logged it as suspicious access and locked the refill portal. We also noted your file per your elder security directive. Just thought you should know. Thank you, Lois said. Please send the incident summary to my attorney as well. David cleared his throat. Already forwarded. Tell Marcus hello from my wife. He helped her cousin with a real estate issue last year. Lois chuckled lightly. I'll pass that along. She hung up and immediately opened her notes app. Sept 10. Unauthorized online refill attempt. CVS flagged and denied. IP mismatch. That afternoon, she met Marcus at his office and handed him the printed CVS incident report. He scanned the first page and nodded once. This is enough to open a fraud complaint with the state medical board. If she accessed your account, that's impersonation. If she tried to refill a medication for you after interfering with your original dose, that's criminal negligence, maybe worse. Lois said nothing. She didn't need to. Marcus was already filling out the digital form. Together, they submitted it. Then Lois picked up the phone again, this time dialing a direct number she'd written down months earlier, but never called until now. Charleston County Sheriff's Office, a female voice answered. Elder Liaison Unit. My name is Lois Callahan, she said, her tone calm, direct. I need to report interference with prescription care by a family member. I've been advised to speak with your elder liaison. The woman on the other end didn't flinch. I can help you with that. Within the hour, a plainclothes deputy met her at home. He didn't wear a badge, just a navy polo, clipboard, and a steady, serious face. Lois guided him into the living room, where every folder was already stacked in chronological order. I'm not trying to press charges, she said, but I want the facts on record. That's often how these things start, he replied. But if the pattern holds, they usually escalate. She handed him the CVS statement, the pill bag, the timestamps. Janet joined halfway through with her own notarized statement, signed and dated. I saw her toss the bag in the bin, Janet said. I pulled it out myself. She had no business touching those pills. The deputy listened, took notes, and asked quiet, specific questions. When he stood to leave, he said, We're opening an inquiry into prescription interference. It'll stay confidential unless charges are brought. That's all I need, Lois said. But the walls weren't soundproof. Across town, at Ethan and Sierra's house, the conversation was much louder. Sierra's voice cut through the hallway like cracked glass. She's making me sound like a damned criminal. Over vitamins and herbs? Over caring too much? Ethan murmured something inaudible. Placating, probably. The same tone he always used when she spiraled and he didn't have the spine to intervene. But someone else heard. Lila, halfway down the stairs with her backpack half-zipped, froze mid-step. She didn't say a word. But later that day, when her fourth-grade teacher asked the class to write a safety story, Lila handed in a 2-sentence essay. Sometimes people hide medicine, even from old people. That's not good. The teacher flagged it. By the next morning, the school counselor had already placed a courtesy call to Child Protective Services. Lois didn't know any of this, not yet. She only knew her inbox had a new reply. Not from Ethan, not from Marcus. From a legal address tagged cc.countyrecords.gov. Subject line, case 02217A. Inquiry. Status, active. And beneath it, a single-line note. Additional reports received. Third-party minors may be impacted. It started with an email. Sierra's inbox lit up at 6:13 a.m. Subject line. Wellness in the Wild, sponsorship reevaluation notice. She blinked at it once, then again. The brand was one of her oldest. A powdered greens company she'd repped for 3 years. They cited recent public concerns involving community welfare and elder care ethics, and said they were pausing all active influencer partnerships pending review. The next two came in by noon. Her aromatherapy affiliate and the gluten-free protein brand. By the end of the week, she'd lost 4 sponsors, and the blog's traffic had tanked by nearly 40%. Still, she posted, performative, serene, unbothered. A video of her arranging crystals on a velvet mat. A reel about cutting ties with generational toxicity. A captioned photo. Some storms come to clear the path. But behind the front door of the Callahan house in Mount Pleasant, the mood was different. A white sedan with tinted windows had parked outside the home twice, once on a Tuesday, again on Friday. A plainclothes CPS agent stepped briefly onto the porch both times, clipboard in hand, then left quietly. No one was arrested, no one shouted, but the neighbors noticed. The HOA president, Helen Dobbins, began calling her morning walks laps around the circus. The next newsletter carried a pointed reminder about cooperative spirit and avoiding distressing attention in the neighborhood. On Sunday, Ethan showed up alone at Lois's door. He didn't knock hard. He never did. Lois opened it halfway and stood there, calm, no invitation. He shifted awkwardly. "Mom, can we talk?" "You are," she said. He exhaled. "How much did you tell them?" Lois tilted her head. "Them?" CPS, the sheriff, whoever's involved now. Her reply was smooth, nonchalant. Only what happened. Ethan rubbed his face with both hands. "You're turning this into a damn legal circus. You're dragging us all through the mud." "I documented what happened. That's not dragging, that's preserving. She's not a monster. She flushed heart medication down the toilet, Ethan." He didn't reply. Behind him, the wind stirred the porch fern. A neighbor across the street paused with her recycling bin, watching. Lois stepped back inside. "Don't come without Lila next time," she said quietly. Then she closed the door. Inside, the air was cool and still. She walked to the dining table, where a new envelope waited. Cream stationery, return address, Drayton Elementary School. Inside was a handwritten thank you note from the school counselor. 2 paragraphs, composed but warm. "We're grateful for the clarity your documentation has provided. Lila is safe, healthy, and processing with great maturity. We're keeping a close eye and offering her support. Please know your courage has made a difference." Lois read it twice, then folded it into a plastic sleeve and slid it into the binder labeled Correspondence, External Acknowledgements. She didn't cry, she didn't smile, she just exhaled, like a woman confirming her instincts had not only been justified, but validated. Later that day, Marcus arrived in his charcoal suit with a flat, zippered portfolio. "It's done," he said, unzipping it on the table. Inside, 2 notarized copies of Lois's will, trust revisions, and health directives. Signed, sealed, duplicated. 1 copy for her fireproof safe, 1 for his records. All of it's clean, legally airtight. If anyone contests after you're gone, we trigger the no contest clause and the explanatory file. Sierra walks away with nothing but legal bills. Lois nodded. "And if she tries while I'm still alive?" Marcus smiled tightly. "She'll regret that too." He tapped the final page, a 1-sentence amendment notarized in bold. "Any individual proven to have interfered with the medical care, cognitive judgment, or physical well-being of the grantor shall forfeit all rights, access, or benefits herein." Janet walked in from the back porch just as he packed up. "We're done?" she asked. "Nearly," Lois said. Janet raised an eyebrow. "What's left?" Lois walked to her safe, pulled out the next folder, and flipped it open. At the back was the cream envelope from Lila, the one with pink daisies and glitter script. She held it between her fingers for a long time, then finally said, "I want to record a message. For Lila. One she won't hear until she turns 18. Janet nodded slowly. "I'll write the script," Lois said. "But I want you to keep the drive until then. You'll know when." As they spoke, another alert lit up Lois's phone, this one from Google Alerts, tied to a public keyword watch she'd set weeks ago. The screen glowed. Sierra Callahan loses brand contract amid ongoing elder care inquiry. Former influencer faces backlash after investigation expands to include child welfare agencies. Lois picked up her pen and added one line to her notebook. September 11th, the House of Wellness has cracks, and they're starting to show. The room smelled faintly of citrus and ink. Lois sat at the head of the table in Marcus's office. The same Charleston brownstone where this all began. The same high windows, the same mahogany trim, the same soft scrape of legal folders against polished wood. But today, there was no draft, no hypotheticals, just permanence. Marcus laid the final document before her. Cream stock, gold embossed, bound at the top corner with a brass brad. Every line was pre-reviewed, double-checked, and indexed with color tabs. "This is it," he said, tapping the last page. "One signature, 2 witnesses, and this becomes your standing directive." Lois reached for her pen. Her hand didn't shake. She signed with slow, even strokes. First name, last name, date. A notary stepped forward. Then Janet, standing beside her as witness, firm and composed. "And just to confirm," Marcus said, eyes flicking across the document, "you understand that Sierra Callahan is to receive no inheritance, no property rights, and no indirect access to any estate disbursement, not even via Ethan's share." "I understand," Lois said, "and that Ethan Callahan's distribution is conditional. If he contests, he forfeits." "I understand that too," Marcus nodded. "Lila's trust will be protected until she reaches 25, with educational and wellness stipends available annually. All funds will be managed by the co-executors." Lois looked to her right, where Janet stood in her pale green blazer, lips pressed into a line of protective determination. "And you've agreed," Marcus continued, "to name Janet Pruitt as your primary healthcare proxy and co-executor." Lois gave a tight nod. "She already is." The documents were witnessed, notarized, and sealed. One copy went into a hardbound legal binder Marcus slid into a navy folio. Another was tucked into a fireproof envelope marked with Lois's initials. "Now," Marcus said, locking the case, "everything's bulletproof." "I prefer airtight," Lois said dryly. He smiled. "You have both." Back at home, Janet helped her slide the final documents into the safe deposit box. Nestled between the psych eval, the ring footage, the medication logs, and the sealed letter to Lila. Lois stood there a moment longer, watching as the thick stack of evidence, of choices, disappeared behind steel and key. Then she shut the door. The house was quiet when they returned, but it no longer felt vulnerable. There were no blind spots now, no uncertain outcomes. Only lines drawn, clear and unflinching. Later that evening, Lois sat on the porch alone, a glass of water in hand, as the sun dipped low over the Charleston skyline. The cicadas buzzed in the distance. Someone down the block played jazz on a record player. Scratchy, uneven, but warm. Inside the house, her phone vibrated once. Incoming email. Sierra Callahan, subject. Closure. Lois stared at the notification on the lock screen, but didn't open it. She didn't need to. She slid the phone face down and turned toward the porch camera instead. The small black lens embedded in the light fixture, blinking once every 30 seconds. Janet stepped outside, carrying a small box. Lois turned. "What's that?" "Backup drive," Janet said. "Everything we've scanned so far. Redundant copies. One for me, one for Marcus, one for the bank safe." Lois accepted it and tucked it into her lap. "You okay?" Janet asked. "I'm tired," Lois said, not defeated. A long pause. Then Janet asked the one question they'd both been holding. "Do you think Ethan will fight it?" Lois looked straight ahead, eyes tracing the edge of the sky where pink turned to navy. "If he does," she said, "he'll be walking through doors I already closed." The screen door creaked behind them. Lois reached for her notebook, always close, and added a new entry, September 12th, will signed. Sierra, $0. Ethan, conditional. Lila, protected. Janet, trusted. She capped the pen. Then, as if summoned by the silence, her phone buzzed again. Not a message, but a notification from her porch camera app. Motion detected. Front door, 6:57 p.m. She opened the feed. The image came into focus slowly. A pair of familiar sneakers, a small backpack, a hand gripping the porch railing. Lila, alone. Lois didn't rush. She moved with the same quiet precision she used in everything now. Deliberate steps to the door, the sound of her heels soft against the rug. Through the peephole, Lila, still alone, her small backpack half unzipped, a water bottle swinging from the side loop. She looked up just once, straight into the lens, then down at her shoes. Lois opened the door. Behind her, a screen door creaked. And from the driveway, Ethan's voice called out, "She wasn't trying to hurt you." Lois didn't flinch. She looked past Lila and saw him standing beside the car, hands in his pockets, posture half slouched like a boy told to apologize. Lois stepped outside, blocking the threshold with her body. "She flushed my medication," she said. "She lied to my doctor. She tried to erase my memory and then rewrite the story." Ethan shook his head. "She thought she was helping. You weren't yourself. She altered controlled substances." His jaw tensed. "You don't need to keep escalating." Lois reached into the folder tucked against her hip and pulled out a sealed envelope. She handed it to him with no ceremony. "The cease and desist, in person, for your records." Ethan didn't take it. Janet appeared at the edge of the porch, arms crossed, phone in one hand. "Lois," she said, just loud enough to be recorded, "you want a witness on record for this interaction?" Lois turned slightly, voice still calm. "Please?" Janet tapped her phone. "Recording now." Finally, Ethan stepped forward and accepted the envelope. He looked down at it like it might burn through his hands. "I didn't come here to argue," he said. "Then don't," Lois replied. He looked to Lila, still quiet on the porch step, then back to Lois. "Can she visit?" "Not now, just sometime. She misses you." Lois studied his face for a long moment. Something in it was frayed, not guilt, not fear, but the slow unraveling of a man who thought silence would protect him. "She can come," Lois said softly, "but alone. No drop-ins. You call first. You stay in the car, and I'll document everything." Ethan nodded once. "She'll be safe." "I never doubted that," Lois said. "The problem was never Lila." She stepped aside, touched Lila's shoulder gently, then handed her a small paper bag. Inside, a red spiral notebook, 2 pens, and a note that read, "For when you need your own version of the story." Lila hugged her without being told, quick, fierce, and silent. Then she stepped off the porch and into the car. Ethan didn't say another word as they pulled away. Lois waited until the taillights disappeared around the corner, then closed the front door, locked it, and pressed save on the porch camera app. Janet walked in behind her and set the phone down. "Well," she said, exhaling, "you were calm." "There's no one left I need to convince," Lois replied. Later that night, Lois logged the interaction. Sep 12. Ethan delivered cease and desist. Lila present. Visit requested. Conditional approval given. Witness, Janet. Footage saved. 1 week later, Lila returned, this time alone. She stood at the door at 3:59 p.m. sharp, hair in 2 braids, holding a small plastic tote full of colored pencils and cookie cutters. Lois let her in with a smile. No cameras rolling this time. Just eyes, just memory. They baked cinnamon snickerdoodles, cracked eggs side by side, rolled dough under wax paper. Lila sang quietly while Lois cleaned the counters, her voice drifting like a breeze through open windows. After the cookies cooled, they sat on the floor with crayons and drew pictures of strong houses. Lila's had a pink roof and a metal lock. Lois's had a camera on every corner and a mailbox that said truth only. When it was time to go, Lois handed her a bag of cookies and a flash drive. "Don't open it until you're 18, she said. Lila blinked. "Promise." Promise. She hugged her again, slower this time. Then, as she walked to the car, she turned back once and whispered, I told the truth too. Lois didn't reply. She just nodded, shut the door, and whispered to no one. I know. Marcus didn't ask questions when Lois arrived with the binder. He simply stood from his desk, cleared a space, and rolled up his sleeves. The office was quiet, early morning light slicing through the blinds, dust motes floating like secrets in suspension. Lois placed the binder down with both hands. Everything's here, she said. Texts, emails, CVS records, tampering timestamps, witness statements, even a flash drive copy of the porch footage. I added voice memos from my doctor, and one from Lila. Marcus opened the cover slowly. The tabs were color-coded, red for legal, blue for medical, green for personal testimony. Her handwriting in the margins was tight, unhurried. You could teach law school with this, he murmured, flipping through a page with 2 attached photos, the crumpled pill wrapper, time-stamped beside the ring footage still. Lois sat down across from him. I want it used. For what? For what comes after. He nodded once, not solemn, but resolute. This will support a preemptive filing. Will establish a posthumous complaint clause with evidence preserved under affidavit. If anyone contests, the judge will see this before they ever step into court. Lois exhaled. Not relief exactly. Something quieter. I also wrote her a letter, she added. For Lila, explaining everything. Marcus looked up. To be delivered when? Upon confirmation of my death, and only if the estate is challenged. Otherwise, she'll read it when she's ready. Janet will know the difference. She pulled a sealed envelope from her bag. Thick cream paper, the same stationery she'd used for the will. But this one hand-addressed in looping cursive. To Lila, when the truth needs company. Marcus accepted it like a sacred object and added it to the green folder. And the video, he asked. Lois nodded. Filmed it yesterday. It's on the drive and backed up to the encrypted cloud you set up. The file is tagged only to open with 3 triggers: contestation, media exploitation, or misrepresentation of my mental state. Janet's name is listed as release authority? Lois smiled slightly. She insisted. Back at home, the sun poured across her dining table like honey. Janet was already there, sipping coffee, her laptop open beside a portable scanner. Marcus says it's flawless, Lois said, unzipping the empty binder she'd returned with. 1 copy filed, 1 in the bank vault, 1 backed up on 3 drives. Janet tapped the flash drive on the table. And the media packet? Sealed, indexed, password locked, all rights reserved. Janet handed her a small card, just a simple typed note in a plastic sleeve. Media executor, Janet Pruitt. Authorization level, full. Activation event, public dispute, libel, or digital defamation. Lois slipped it into her filing drawer. Everything had a place now. That afternoon, she sat at her desk and opened a blank document. At the top, she typed a single title in bold. Legacy Addendum, Personal Ethics Clause. Beneath it, she wrote, I do not seek revenge. I seek record. There is no vindication in silence, only burial. I kept these records because I was not supposed to. Because people like me, older, female, inconvenient, are too easily erased or reworded. If this document is being read in court, then know, this story has already been lived. I ask only that it be seen. She printed it, signed it, and added it to the never folder in her safe. Then she poured herself a glass of water and walked out to the porch. The light was falling fast now, twilight chasing the heat back into the marshes. Her phone buzzed on the side table. Another alert from her Google keyword watch. This one had no headline, just a single snippet, captured from a since-deleted post on Sierra's wellness blog. There are people who think records make them right, that just because they documented it, it's truth. But sometimes the truth is uglier than facts. Lois took a slow sip of water. Then she reached for her notebook and wrote, September 13th, Sierra is unraveling. Records remain. She closed the book, but before she stood, she opened her voice memo app and hit record. Her voice came through steady, certain. This is Lois Callahan. If you're hearing this, someone has tried to rewrite what I lived. This file exists to remind you. I was not confused. I was not frail. I was paying attention, she paused. Then, and I wrote everything down. She pressed stop. Then she saved it. To the cloud, to the flash drive, to the truth. Lois pressed the pen firmly as she signed the final POD update form. The banker on the other side of the glass partition nodded, polite but distant, unaware of the full weight behind the signature. Everything will transfer automatically upon death, he confirmed. Each beneficiary has been updated per your instructions. She gave a crisp nod. No delays, no discretion. No discretion, he repeated. Lois left with a folder of receipts and a piece that felt unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. The last automatic transfer had been tied to Ethan and Sierra's joint account. Now, every line named either Lila's trust, Janet, or the literacy foundation she had quietly supported for 2 decades. On the way home, she made one more stop. The local medication safety nonprofit tucked into a corner suite near the senior center. The office was modest, the receptionist young and slightly overwhelmed by the formal check Lois handed over. Would you like to leave it anonymously, the woman asked. No, Lois said, pulling out a slip of paper. I'd like it listed under Sierra Callahan, as a gift in her name. The receptionist blinked. Of course. Back home, Janet was already in the kitchen, humming over a saucepan of vanilla custard. She looked up with a grin. You bring the graham crackers. Lois held up the box. And sliced bananas. They layered the pudding together like 2 women building something sacred. On the table beside them sat 2 notarized copies of Lois's final documentation packet, one for the house, one for Marcus. Every page logged, stamped, and laminated where it counted. Janet spooned the first bowl and handed it over. To airtight futures, Lois tapped her spoon to Janet's, to documented ones. That evening, Lois opened her laptop and clicked publish. The new blog was minimalist. Black text on a white background, no ads, no comments, just stories. Her first post was titled, They called it confusion, I called it theft. In it, she didn't name names. She didn't need to. She wrote about the cost of being doubted, the way women were taught to minimize discomfort, to shrink suspicion. She wrote about the night she'd watched her own health slip through someone else's fingers, and chose, instead of silence, to write it all down. The post ended with one sentence. I was not confused. I was interrupted. She scheduled the next 3 entries and closed the laptop. The next morning, she found a sticky note on the fridge in crooked handwriting and glitter gel ink. You're my favorite grown-up. Lila Lois peeled it gently from the metal and pressed it into her notebook. No date, just the words. Later that day, her inbox pinged with one new message. From ethan.callahan@gmail.com. Subject. No subject. She hesitated before opening it. The email was short. 4 lines. I'm sorry for not seeing it sooner. I thought keeping the peace meant protecting everyone. I realize now I was just protecting myself. I hope Lila remembers you the way I should have. Lois didn't reply. She didn't need to. Instead, she saved it. Not to the legal binder, not to the archive. To a folder named What Regret Sounds Like. Then she opened her blog dashboard and started typing the next post. The price of politeness. And in the background, the house hummed, not with fear, not with tension, but with quiet, documented truth. Lois stepped into the garden barefoot, the soil cool under her feet. Morning light slanted through the azaleas, and the rosemary by the fence had bloomed again. Late, stubborn, but alive. She breathed deep and felt her pulse, calm, even. Her pills were on schedule. Her tea was steeping back on the porch. Nothing was forgotten now, not even her body. Each step through the garden felt deliberate, Ritualistic, not a tour, but a kind of accounting. She paused by the hydrangeas, touched a leaf, glanced up at the soft drone of the porch camera overhead. Still watching, still recording. Inside the house, the safe sat open on the dining table, not out of carelessness, but clarity. 3 folders lay side by side. Now, next, never. Inside, now. The will, trust, healthcare directives, notarized and indexed. Inside, next. The sealed envelope for Lila, the flash drive of the blog backups, and the video statement. Time locked for contingency. Inside, never. The affidavit of events, the psych evaluation, and the one still photo that Janet had framed just that morning. It was small, black and white, time-stamped. Sierra hunched over the guest toilet, hand half submerged, fingers wrapped around a dissolving white tablet. "This is the moment," Janet had said as she slid it into the silver frame. "The one they'll never be able to scrub." Lois had nodded. Print 2, 1 for the vault, 1 for the classroom. Because that afternoon, she was teaching again, not at the library this time, but at the senior center, where the overhead lights buzzed too bright, and the projector screen rolled down with a sigh. The workshop was titled, "Digitizing Your Defense: How to Document When No One Believes You." She clicked through slides of password logs, camera apps, digital timestamps, metadata audits. Her voice was calm, but her eyes stayed sharp. "You don't need to be paranoid," she told the room. "You need to be prepared." At the end of the session, one woman in the back stood and said, "I always thought my daughter-in-law was just clumsy, but maybe not." The room chuckled gently, but Lois didn't. "Write it down anyway," she said, "even if it turns out you're wrong, because if you're right, you'll never regret having proof." Later that night, she returned home and set the ring photo frame beside the safe. Janet had printed it in archival ink. "Just in case she ever tries to erase the digital version," she'd said. Lois smiled. "Then we hang it in the hallway." On the kitchen counter sat a new drawing, a loose sheet of construction paper folded in half like a greeting card. On the front, a crayon version of Lois with a silver crown, cape flying behind her, and a shield that said "Truth." Inside, Lila had written in pencil, slanted and smudged, "Super Grandma never lets anyone lie and get away with it." Lois didn't cry. Instead, she walked the paper to the safe, slipped it between the pages of the next folder, and ran her fingers across the crown one last time. As she stood there, the house quiet, she opened her notebook to one final page. She wrote, "September 14th, garden steady, classroom full, photo framed." Lila's hero drawing filed. Then she paused, capped her pen, closed the book. She looked to the photo again, then whispered aloud. Not bitter, not triumphant, just clear. "My daughter-in-law flushed my medication, so I flushed her out of my will."